Hi guys, this is R.A. Sweeney here to talk to you about the Ten Commandments or Hadvarim plaque. Today I really wanted to talk about the concept of the Ten Commandments and exactly how that ties in with the rest of Scripture before we dive into the individual lines. And just a heads up, obviously I'm not outside. I like to do these with a little bit of scenery and some pretty things in the background, but it's awfully windy right now and a little bit cold, so thought I'd just record this one here in my office. So getting into the Ten Commandments. So, when you look at the Ten Commandments, they usually get listed out numerically. But if you look at different translations, especially from different faith traditions, you'll notice they don't always line up with each other. I know we have downstairs, there's a poster that we got years ago that had the Ten Commandments, which was not completely, but it was different than the Ten Commandments that I was taught. And so they get broken up a little bit differently depending on your faith tradition. The other thing that you'll notice with the plaque that I did, the Hadvarim plaque, is I start out with Yahweh is what God identifies his name as, or at least part of what he identifies his name as. He is your God, the rescuer from slavery, which almost never gets tied into the Ten Commandments. The reason that I included it is if you go back into Jewish history, you've got different texts that they compiled where their rabbis were kind of discussing and debating how God had communicated to his people and kind of what was the essence of things. So boiling it down, and then also extrapolating it out from what God had given. So there's a lot of discussion, and really it was kind of like ancient Jewish commentary on the law. And so as you look through some of those, particularly in that period when the Jews were in Babylon, and then after that, before Jesus came in that kind of intertestamental period, there's some discussion about how many commands are there in the law. And so what they came up with was that there were 611 different commands in the Torah. So those were thou shalls and thou shall nots. But then they kind of mostly everyone agreed that there were two other commands that were not thou shalls and thou shalt nots. And one of those is right here, the Yahweh is your God, the rescuer from slavery. They determined that was an actual command, that he is your God. So I thought that that was very, very important to be included since that's how it was always viewed traditionally. So I wanted that to be included in there. So when you go back to what you probably were taught as the 10, what I definitely was taught as the 10, and the different variations on there, you kind of get about 11 of those. Plus this one that I've added on to the beginning, you could make a strong argument for there being 12 commandments here. And nowhere in the texts does it say the Ten Commandments. That's not a term from the Bible. You never see that anywhere. You might see it in your printed Bible or your online Bible as like a section header. Those are added after the fact. It's not part of the actual scripture, but the scripture itself never calls it the Ten Commandments. So you could make a strong argument for 12, depending on how you divide things up. You can see I kind of combined a couple at the top. Usually the regulations on coveting at the end of the Ten Commandments is pretty long and might get broken up into a couple. So a few different ways that you can break this up. You could make that argument for 12. I stuck with the traditional 10. And the reason that I did so, because I really considered is 12 a more appropriate number? The reason I stuck with 10 is when you look at how these commandments played into the actual narrative. So there's 10 commandments right after God rescues his people out of Egypt. The way that he rescued his people out of Egypt also 10 plagues. And the interesting thing with the plagues is the way the Bible describes it is God spoke 10 words against Egypt. It's words that God spoke against Egypt, which is exactly what the commandments are. It's the words God spoke to Moses to give to the Jewish people, which all links us all the way back. The first time a group of 10 shows up in the Bible is in Genesis 1, where God spoke to creation. He spoke 10 times, 10 speaking activities made Eden out of chaos. So you have God created Eden out of chaos in Genesis 1. In Egypt, God spoke 10 words to sort of uncreate, to undo creation in Eden. And now he's giving 10 more words to sort of recreate Eden in God's people group. So to reshape his people into that sort of original image of man. So that's why I stuck with the 10. That's what Had Devarim means. Is the words, which is all kind of tying back through that progression. So we'll dive into what the actual commands are in the next few videos, or the next probably 10 videos, but at least wanted to kind of introduce why there's 10 videos, the way they're broken up, and those sorts of things. So I hope that was a blessing. Stay tuned, and we'll have more videos. Thanks, guys.